How's your energy level? How's your muscle tone, sister? Listen, today in this episode, we're talking all about vitamin D and how it might affect both of those and maybe, a thousand other things. So, I'm talking today with my guest, Missy Bane, who's a functional diagnostic practitioner. We're going to talk a little bit about the benefit of, first of all, identifying signs and symptoms you might be low in vitamin D, what optimal levels are, and how you can test not only vitamin D, but other things that you may want to dig a little deeper into for your own know how and how you might want to advocate for yourself. So it's all inside on this episode. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns and hopefully, most of all, inspire you. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset sometimes about how to eat and how to move so you can have the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in this second and better half. Let's dive in. My guest today, Missy Bane, is a functional diagnostic practitioner and holistic health coach. She dove into functional medicine in 2012 after her own health crisis and personally experienced the natural healing that she now teaches. She helps clients age healthy by creating a health plan that incorporates not only diet and exercise, but detoxification, sleep, stress, digestion, and all the things that contribute to optimal health. Many clients come to her when they want to dig to the root cause of health issues and no longer want to just treat symptoms, while others focus on long term health and preventing illness. As an FDN, Missy works under a medical director's license with credentials to run functional labs such as stool tests, neurotransmitter tests, hormone panels, and more to uncover hidden stressors that contribute to your health issues. She and her husband are new empty nesters and love spending time on the 50-mile Capitol Bike Trail near their home, running, walking their new puppy, and cycling. Missy, thanks so much for being here.
Deborah, I'm so happy to be here. I feel like we've been sort of virtual BFFs for a long time, so I'm happy to finally connect.
I do too. So that's the one, maybe two, but it's definitely a positive of social media. So I feel like I've talked to you on a regular basis. And in fact, sometimes I think you're picking up after me, but we won't go into that.
No, it's all good. Love, love, love.
And I have to, so I told this to Missy in the green room, so all you listeners get to hear it again. But, I'm reading her introduction literally, so I know her that well. I literally am reading it. But when I read she's a new empty nester, I was like, that can't be true because I would have had
Yeah.
you pegged for like 30 something from
Oh,
your
stop
photos.
it. Oh my gosh, now
Yes.
you are my BFF forever.
So I was like, wow, okay.
Yes,
So whatever she's
yes.
doing is working. So we're going to try to start drinking the Missy Kool-Aid today.
Yeah, come on, let's do it. Yeah, we have a 25-year-old and a almost 21-year-old, and yeah, so one moved out and one moved in, and finally they're both out, which is I can't complain.
And it's
So
so
yeah,
great
life
to
is good.
like them,
Yeah.
right? As adults, it's so
Oh
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
so fun, so fun.
All right. So, I mean, and the biggest reason that I finally, got you on, I kept thinking there's going to be something where, we're on such a parallel belief system. And not that it's bad, by the way, for listeners to have a contradictory kind of person on either, but Missy has these posts that are so good. And I'm like, yep, yep, yep. Love that, love that. But she posted one day about vitamin D, and the things she posted were so kind of right in the heart of what's important to you, listener. And I said, let's do a podcast on this. Let's really start and dive into all things vitamin D. And this may end up evolving and going elsewhere, but I'd love to start with that and let everybody know that's what we'll be talking about. But before we do, everybody here, has a little bit of small town girl in them, and we like to know the dirt. So, what was your health crisis? What's your story?
Oh, yeah. Well, my health crisis was, after years of, I chuckle and say, in college, my go-to was the McDonald's drive-through and Dr. Pepper. It kind of depended on the time of the day, what that looked like. But after college, I started getting myself together a little bit more. And then after kids, things just kind of hit a brick wall, and I was constipated for 15 years. And so every time I would go to my OB each year for a checkup, he'd say, "What's up?" And I'd say, "Oh, I feel good. I'm still not pooping. Like I'll go a week without going to the bathroom." And he'll say, "Oh, give me a different, kind of laxative or something to take." And this went on and on for years, obviously. And finally, I just got sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And I also have scoliosis, so I exercise a lot and I'm in pain a lot. And so I was kind of at an all-time low where I had pulled my back. I felt overweight. My gut was a wreck. I was, I just felt crappy. And I ended up in bed on muscle relaxers one weekend, and my kids and my husband had gone camping for the weekend. And I said, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. So I took to the internet and I ordered supplements and workout programs and shakes and like you name it. And when I started replacing my breakfast with a meal replacement shake, my life completely changed. And it wasn't that shake, it was really what I took out. I took out the gluten, I took out the dairy, which I now know I have, intolerances to, and I just can't do it. It makes me feel terrible. And so once I discovered that, I started kind of informally talking to people in my world about it, because they're going, "What are you doing? You look great. You look like you feel so much better. Like, what's gone on?" And that evolved into me kind of looking for, a wellness program that I could kind of do on the side. And I was a full-time photographer, had my own photography business. So in the down months, January, February, I would kind of get online and start learning things. And it evolved into me getting certified in this program. And that's been 6 years ago. So in a nutshell, that's sort of my story. But, I realized that my doctor just wasn't going to help me, and I had to figure it out on my own. Not because he didn't want to, it was just because he couldn't.
Yeah, and I have to say, for a lot of the women listening, this is a recurring theme. In
Mm-hmm.
in our Facebook groups, it's like, I went to my doctor and this is what they said, and it's like, yeah, I'm sorry that happened, but it's all too common. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I know. I hear
love
it a
it.
lot too.
Yeah, you turned right back around and stuck your hand out to help somebody else. So I love you. So, all right, we got you here to chat a little bit about vitamin D and its importance. So, though we may go somewhere else, let's talk about that. And I'm
Yeah.
going to start with maybe a non-traditional way, but I think it's relevant to, why does everybody have so much more energy in the summer? Or
Mm,
simply days with sunshine. We
yeah.
can kind of dive into that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people think, "Oh, well, the weather is warm and that just makes me happy." And maybe that's part of it. But you're right. There is a biochemical reason for it. And so, I don't want to, I just finished some training in functional blood chemistry analysis. So I won't geek out on you guys too much. But I do want to kind of go through like what vitamin D is, because I think there's a common misconception that it's actually like a vitamin, like vitamin C. We can only get it from a supplement, and that's not the case. So I kind of want to lay out what it is and how it functions a little bit, just to kind of give you, kind of drive home the importance of what this vitamin does in our body, because it's really not a vitamin. It actually functions more like a steroid hormone. So the form that you typically get in a food or a supplement or indirectly from the sun is vitamin D3, but your body actually converts this into a steroid hormone called calcitriol. And it's converted in the liver and kidneys, and it converts it to 25 hydroxy vitamin D. So you see that on your lab work. If you ever have vitamin D drawn, it'll say 25D. And that's what circulates. So, and also, vitamin D helps increase the amount of calcium your gut can actually absorb from food into the bloodstream. So it prevents calcium loss in the kidneys. So even more reason why everything is so connected. Our holistic approach is because the kidney and the liver are crucial to how our body processes vitamin D or how it assimilates it. And calcium isn't just for bone density. It's, like we hear, it's also crucial for blood clotting. I mean, the list goes on. So anyway, vitamin D is super important for calcium. And then once vitamin D is turned into this active form, it travels through the body and plays a part in so many vital functions. And I just want to talk about kind of the key ones that I tend to talk about with my clients. And I think most women, are really focused on. Like you said, it builds bones, muscles, but it also helps reduce inflammation. And we know that inflammation is kind of the beginning of a lot of disease. And it also helps make enzymes and proteins that help prevent disease. There's a genetic component there that I'll talk about in a second. But it also supports aging. And obviously, we've heard probably in the last year about optimal levels of vitamin D have been linked to stronger immune systems. Lower levels we now know they're linked to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer. There's still a lot we don't know, but we absolutely know that every cell, every tissue in our body has a vitamin D receptor. It has a protein that binds to that vitamin D. And in its active form, it interacts literally with every cell in the body. I mean, I don't know what else we can say that about. There might be some other things out there, but so anyway, that's why I get so excited about it. That's why I just try to really educate my clients around why this is so important. And it frustrates me because a lot of insurance companies do not want to pay for this marker in a lab report. But I'm like, we need to see it, especially if there's some things in sort of the support systems that I just talked about that are deficient or struggling. So a couple more things that I want to touch on. So we know from a study that vitamin D affects the expression of almost 1,000 genes in the body. I mean, that's about 5% of our body. And so, think about if that was your car and 5% of your car wasn't working properly, it'd be like, hello, we need to do something about this. So it's a big
Check engine
influence.
light is on, right?
Exactly. Put it on that list and pay for it, insurance companies. It's important to our health. Yeah, it's very frustrating. But at a cellular level, we have cells that mutate. That's just what they do. And vitamin D actually plugs into these mutated cells. I mean, that's part of its job. And it delivers sort of, I guess, instruction for the cell to repair itself. And it says, okay, fix this mutation and get back to being healthy, do your normal replicating thing, right? But if it doesn't plug in and it doesn't give that instruction and to tell the cell to fix itself, it then provides the instructions for the cells to kind of take itself out, meaning to basically have this process that's called apoptosis, cell program death. And so, gosh, tell me that's not important for, our cells to be hearing that instruction from our vitamin D, right? So anyway, what questions do you have for me so far? I kind of threw out a lot of stuff. Any thoughts?
That's great. Yep. So there's a couple things I want to pull back out for listeners. So number one, so we're kind of talking about when there are low levels, what happens. Let's talk a little bit about the difference for listeners between norms in Western medicine, where a lot of people who don't feel good have been tested, included in those norms, and where optimal ranges are that you and I use with our clients. So what are the norms? And I can't even quote them anymore. I just know where my optimal ranges are and where I want people. So,
well, there was actually a study from 1966, somewhere in there, to around 2013 that showed on a global scale, that people with serum levels between 40 and 60 nanograms per milliliter, I'll just say NGMNL, that have the lowest all-cause mortality, meaning they die less of all non-accidental type diseases or whatever. And so, but I think the last number I saw in the United States is about 70% of the population has vitamin D below 30 NGML. And we want optimal in the functional medicine world. We want optimal to be between 40 and 70. Yeah, what's your sweet spot that you?
I like to see 60 to 80.
Yeah.
60 to
Okay.
80. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and let's go down this path too. So,
Sure.
what would be signs, symptoms that listeners might be low in vitamin D and not know it if they haven't had that test?
Yeah. I mean, it could be a lot of things, a lot of
Yeah.
mental health, anxiety, depression. That's a biggie, a real biggie, especially after this past year. It could be, heart issues, whether it's high cholesterol. Often I will see a lot of my women will have like cholesterol issues, and they're not like typical, they haven't had that in the past. They're not obese. They don't have heart disease in their family, but they'll just have kind of these wonky sort of, lipid markers, um, you know, all kinds. I
Energy.
mean, energy,
Energy.
yeah, brain
Yeah.
fog, kind of all of the things that go along with all of that. Yeah, for sure.
And a lack of muscle tone is another one. So if you're
Mm,
struggling, especially, and you're
okay.
doing all the strength training things and you're thinking it's not working. I mean, there could be other
Yeah.
things involved there. So we've got to talk about your protein and your sleep, but you want to look at vitamin D could be a factor. Vitamin D is very related to your fast twitch muscle fiber. We
You
lose
mentioned
fast.
that. I thought that
Yeah.
was so interesting. I did not know that factoid. That's cool.
And we lose that fast twitch muscle fiber twice as fast as we lose slow with aging.
Hmm.
Now, relevant to all of you listeners, my hope is I'm preaching to the choir. You're already very active, so your loss is declining at a much slower rate, not nearly
Hmm.
as much or as fast as someone who's sedentary. But
Hmm.
still, we probably are fighting. We are aging. We're not getting out of this one without it, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but you need it, and more vitamin D can often help, so much so that if you've got high school kids, you've got young kids who are trying to play more football and they want to be faster and get bigger and stronger, they should be checking their vitamin D's as well, and
Yeah.
we need their levels to be high. But the same is true
Mhm.
for you, Missy. I want to come back to a question that you inspired in me, and we may not have the answer, but I think it's a great question for us to be pondering here. Have you noticed midlife women often will spike in cholesterol even though they never have? Have you noticed a correlation with that happening in your midlife menopausal females and a correlation with low D?
Yeah, you know what? I haven't necessarily connected those two dots um, outside of other markers, but yeah, I'll have to go back and look at that because I have a couple of clients right now that I'm working with that's the case. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So I need to
Yeah,
kind of go back and look
would
at that.
be, yeah,
Uh
for
huh.
listeners. So I think if you're a midlife woman who's suddenly, each of your annual checks, you've seen that cortisol go up and up and up while you're going through the menopause transition, and you don't know what those D levels are, or you're not staying in optimal ranges, it might be something worth exploring. So I know
Yeah.
somebody listening needed to hear that.
Yeah. Well, and another kind of to piggyback on that thought is if you are getting, and we can talk about this in a few minutes because this is a real passion of mine as well. If you're not getting annual blood work done, and you're not able to see sort of that year to year shift, and hopefully everything is so normal as far as optimal ranges go for you and it's not an issue, but if you have blood work from year to year and you can go back and see, did I have any big shifts in a biomarker? To me, again, like the cholesterol, I have a couple of people that all of a sudden they're like, why do I have this high cholesterol? But it could be something else. It could be a metabolic marker. It could be something else because you can see all of the things that vitamin D sort of helps support in our body. So if you do have a drastic shift in a biomarker, it might be, you might be able to connect the dot with vitamin D, and it could be a relatively simple sort of, place to start. But the other thing, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've got
Yeah,
a follow up question,
sure.
and don't know if you know the answer to this. So what's a vitamin D depleter? Any medications, any lifestyle habits that might be
Yeah.
known to deplete it?
Yeah, actually, that segues right into the point I was just getting ready to make is, we have an obesity epidemic in our world for the most part. And because vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, it means it's stored in our fat. And so there is a higher body fat percentage means a decrease in the bioavailability of vitamin D. And I think the number is about 50%. Yeah, so your fat is potentially soaking up about 50% of the vitamin D that's circulating in your body and preventing it from making its way to those tissues, those cells that it needs to get to. Other things, if you're at a latitude where you're not getting, the UVB light, if you have a lot of melanin in your skin, which makes your skin darker, you might have reduced vitamin D. But, and ideally, if you can get into sunlight, especially this time of year in most of the world, for 20 minutes a day, you can get about 10,000 IUs of vitamin D. So it doesn't take a lot of time. You don't have to, worry about skin cancer, hopefully for about, 15 to 20 minutes out in the sunlight.
Yeah, love that.
Mm.
So anything else you want to add about vitamin D specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I don't recommend people just kind of willy-nilly supplementing with vitamin D. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you're like, you know what, I've heard you guys talk. I'm going to go ahead and try some supplementation. Make sure you have a D3K2, reputable from a reputable company. Go ahead and start maybe 100 or 1,000 IUs maybe per day. It will raise your serum levels by about 5 nanograms per milliliter, and until you get your blood work done. If you're like, I've got the brain fog, I've got the lack of muscle tone, the things that we've already talked about, I would say go ahead and implement that. Obviously, maybe put a call into your doctor's nurse and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm coming in a couple weeks. But yeah, I think it's important, especially if you're not getting out into the sunlight, if you're living that part of the world that you can't do that, or you do have, a higher body fat percentage and you're concerned about it. That could be a really good place to start.
Yeah, great point. And I think we could say that and probably echo each other on both of or on both parts. Don't shoot blanks. It's
Mm-hmm.
always best to do a micronutrient test, and
Mm-hmm.
look it over with a functional doctor or a functional health coach and find out what are optimal levels. What are you really shooting for, as opposed to what are norms, and
Mm-hmm.
then begin your supplement journey after that. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I call it expensive pee. Like you can
Yeah.
buy all the supplements and take all of them, but it really makes a lot more sense if you partner with somebody and really target your supplementation based on what's going on in your body. If you have deficiencies, like really honing in, because a lot of the multivitamins out there are good sort of, I call it a security blanket. Yeah, go ahead and take it and your body will get rid of most of what it doesn't need. But if you're deficient in magnesium, you're not getting enough magnesium in a multi. If you're deficient in vitamin D, you're not getting enough vitamin D in that multi. So I'm a huge, huge fan of everyone going annually, especially as we age. Go annually, get your blood work done, and don't settle for the 10, markers that your doctor will order. Go deep. And I have a checklist that I'm happy to share with you. It's just a free checklist that kind of gives people a little bit of, a few things to think about when they go for their annual checkup, key markers to look for, especially as women. We need in-depth thyroid panels each year. A lot of times doctors don't want to do that. So I'm a big fan, because what you can do is all of a sudden you're plugging along healthy, feeling good. And all of a sudden you're like, you go down like a ton of bricks and you're like, why am I tired all the time? Why am I gaining this weight right here? Well, guess what? You can go get your updated lab work. You can look at prior year labs and say, okay, what's happened with my blood sugar, with my insulin, with, some of the key markers that might attribute to what you have going on. And if you can see sort of, a decline and maybe a certain biomarker that might, kind of make sense and can help you connect the dots with what's going on inside your body, it might prevent you from going to the doctor and them saying, oh, well, I'm going to send you to this specialist and this specialist. It might be a really um, not easy, but it might be a fix that we can kind of work through together and kind of resolve what might be going on.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So, yes, where can they get the checklist?
I will send it to you. You can send it to everybody. Yeah, it's a great little tool just to kind of have in your hand, take with you to the doctor, and really advocate for yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly the word I was thinking of. And I think it's important to also say, yeah, if you have great insurance and you have a practitioner who's willing to work with you and say, you know, yeah, I'll order those based on what you're saying. If you can sometimes justify, here's why I'm asking this, and I think
Exactly.
I should take this, that's a much better way to ask, and to kind of stand up for yourself and what you want. And, then get the benefit of that great insurance if you've got it. And then I think always it's good to know going in, even if insurance doesn't cover this, I mean, this is your life. This is your
Right.
energy. So an
Yes.
investment, beyond something in order to live better every day is, something I would say it's an individual decision, but worth pondering for yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's a good investment. Even if you don't, I think you offer third party, lab testing as well. But I mean, you can get we each of us can send a link in a second for third party lab testing that literally will print out an order for you to go to LabCorp Quest, and you can get comprehensive deep blood work that will really show what's going on in your body. And it doesn't always mean that as a functional health coach that I can help you resolve it, but it might shine a light on some things that are going on that then we can say, hey, you do need to go see the specialist. I had a client a few months ago, and she had terrible gut issues, and so we ran a stool test. That seemed like a really great place to start, but she had some markers come back that her inflammation was off the charts. Her immune system was just in complete overdrive. And so I said, it's definitely time for you to go see a gastroenterologist. And she did, and she has celiac disease, and it wasn't because I was so brilliant. It was just, we knew that that was kind of the next step that she needed to take based on, those numbers that came back.
Such a great example. And so
Mhm.
much probably for her resolved, so that she's
Yeah,
feeling better, has a solution, knows the why. And that I think alone is, let's solve the mystery of why you don't feel good, why you don't have energy, why,
yeah,
you're not absorbing all of the things, the good things that you are ingesting. There is almost always a reason, but until you get under the hood and open things up, it's really hard to just guess at what that might be.
so true, so true. Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories like that, and it's not always cut and dry like that. Obviously, sometimes it's a matter of like just taking out. You look at it as, did you ever play that game Pick Up Sticks, where different colored
Yeah.
sticks and you drop them on the ground and you pull back
Yep.
the different colors, and it's like sometimes it's just pulling back one color at a time, and waiting to see if the body sort of realigns and makes some shifts and heals itself. So it's not always super easy, but it's a wonderful place to start. And I feel like I really encourage everybody to, if you haven't, especially this past year, I'm finding that everybody's like, oh, I didn't want to go into the doctor's office if I didn't have to, which I totally understand. Um, I really, really encourage everyone just to make an appointment, go in and get some comprehensive labs drawn, and at least just put them on file. Even if you're feeling great, if it's been more than a year or so, definitely go get that updated.
I'm so glad you said that because, I mean, twofold. Obviously, there are a lot of people, even though we're coming back out in most areas anyway, people are opening back up and either feel more safe, more confident, or, their communities are open. So they can go do some of those things they put off. So if you haven't, that's been on the back burner, you haven't done that, going to do that. But what I really love that you mentioned, which is so important. So if you're out there and you're listening and you are thinking, well, I don't have a problem right now, I'm feeling pretty good, having the markers of what is feeling good? What does that test look like? Is
Mhm.
really something valuable that I didn't know to do, right? I mean, I wish I would have known and actually I started doing my own testing in 2013. I wish I would have done it, in 203. So I would have had
Yeah.
a better idea of, okay, when, I was in my early 40s and had no signs or whispers that I was going to go through menopause, I was going to totally skip it, right?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
would have known, what was that? What was optimal energy, optimal sleep, optimal muscle tone? And then you've got really where norm is for you, which is so much more relevant to you than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and back to your point, like even if you are not wanting to get back in the world yet, we both have links to direct to consumer lab testing, so there's no excuse. All you have to do is go to the lab,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And it's so empowering not just to get the test and to, sit down with someone who understands the results, but then so that you can understand the
yes.
results and what's
Hmm.
happening in your own body. And I sense that in most of the women in our community, I'm sure this is true of clients that you work with, that women have a degree of intuition. And
Hmm.
sometimes we just have kind of quieted that intuition about ourselves. We've got it great for everyone else.
Yeah.
But, when you start to get feedback like that and actually look at the lab test, it wakes that intuition up and it will
Yep.
remind you that, I've always had that idea or always had that I never liked that, or there's little things that will start to come together as your puzzle pieces.
Yes.
Love that.
Yeah. And it kind of takes away the stress of, am I doing all of the things that I need to be doing for my health, to age healthy? Am I going to end up having the heart disease like my dad or the cancer like my mom? And it doesn't mean by running labs that you're going to prevent that, but at least it takes away that stressor of the unknown. It's like you feel like you do have sort of that control back, and it is empowering for sure.
So love that. Missy, it's been so great to talk to you. And I mean, vitamin D started this conversation, but I think the real, nugget here, the takeaway is test, don't guess, right?
Yeah. Amen. This has been
And
great.
where can listeners find more Missy?
More Missy is missybane.com on my website. On Instagram, I am missy.bane. On Facebook, I am Missy Bane FDNP. So just some variation of my name. You can find me out in the world for sure. Yeah.
Fantastic. So listeners, as you know, if you're walking, you're lifting, you're driving, I've got you covered. So the links to connect with Missy are all going to be in the show notes. So I love her. I feel like she's my next door neighbor in Instagram, which is really funny, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what it feels like. So I see you every day. I'm like, there she is. Hey, Missy. So listeners, now it's all up to you. Is there a question that you wish I would have asked Missy? So you can leave that below the show notes at flipping50.com/vitamin D. And I look forward to hearing from you, and I will pass any question that I can handle along to Missy so that she can help and jump on the bandwagon. And what are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.